Okay, so that was, there's a hair on my, I didn't even turn on my light because I'm so prepared. Lights, too much, too much. And the puppies opened the door, so I don't think anything's going to be like we wanted, but that's fine. Hey guys, welcome to the Indie Spotlight for March 2022. Today I'm going to be reviewing Beastly by Jay Noble. This book actually was intended to release, I think, March 20th, but it came out a little earlier. I read it. It's a pretty quick read, about 194 pages. Paranormal romance, I believe, is the category. But before I jump into the review itself, I'm going to give you guys the down low with the description from the Amazon account. Sarah's life is comfortable and uncomplicated. Everything changed the day she nearly knocked down a beast of a man while she chased a shoplifter. Now her life is complete chaos. There is someone hunting trueborn and shifters. A family member concerned she is next hired a guardian to watch over her. No matter how much she protests, she can't escape Zale's relentless determination to protect her. Thrown into a world of violence, magic, shape-shifting, and chaos, Sarah tries to come to terms with her new way of life. On top of the fact, Zale makes her feel things for him she doesn't want to feel. Falling for him will forever change her world. She misses her quiet life. Being thrust into his world, she isn't sure she will survive. All right, so based on what I read and that description, I would say that a lot of the focus is on Sarah. Now, the book itself is written in dual POV, not necessarily limited to alternating chapters, though for the most part it does. Sometimes it does shift with like a scene change where it's, like separated with asterisks or however. But Sarah is one of the POVs, and the other one is Zale, who is the guardian bodyguard for her. Just based on that description, we're not necessarily getting his POV, which is not an issue because I think that she, as the character who's coming into this different world, definitely has more to learn, and we as the reader coming into the world are going to relate to her more. So we're going to go over my favorite topics first with the cover, as seen here. So we have an animal of sorts. It's hard to tell exactly what the animal is because it is so close up on the eye, but I'm not gonna lie, the curve of the nose, and I think it might just be the shadow that gives it like rounder cheeks. I keep thinking of like a chipmunk or a squirrel, especially with those big gorgeous eyes. And in that eye you can kind of see, let's actually enlarge this. Now, I don't know if this is actually part of the photo of the person taking a picture of the animal's said eye, or the other thing that makes me think of is a porcupine because of kind of like the dark fur with the white spikes. But anywho, when I looked at it again before I started reading the ebook, I thought it was like the silhouette of just a person, maybe whoever, if this was the shifter, like I kind of assumed that Sarah would have like more of the werewolf thing going on with her, and this might be Sarah looking at somebody, not necessarily someone looking at Sarah, if that's who or what that silhouette is there. I'm not 100% sure it was intentional. It doesn't quite look like a specific creature for me to say like, oh, this is a werewolf and witch story. And with that, in the description, it's the world of trueborn and shifters. Now, again, I figure, okay, shifters, that's kind of a very typical phrase that we use for werewolves, people who transform into animals, etc. I figured, okay, maybe a shifter was someone who was turned into that, and a trueborn was like born as a wolf transforming thing. I did not realize until more context clues throughout the first few chapters that a trueborn is more like a witch. So anyway, that's kind of my little talk about the cover there, where it's not quite giving to what the actual story is about. There isn't enough concrete parts in the description aside from shifter to kind of give you an idea, okay, this is someone who might turn into an animal. All right, and since I already started talking about the characters, that's what I'm going to jump into next. So the main characters, as I mentioned, was Sarah, who we don't know initially, but it's very quickly revealed that she is a trueborn. So she does belong in this world of magic and paranormal, I guess if you just want to categorize it. Pretty much just to kind of delve a little bit into the plot, but also to kind of give you a better idea of how these characters are introduced and interact with each other. At the beginning, we're actually in Zale's point of view, and he's walking down the street on the way to a meeting when the shoplifter runs out, and the girl that runs after him runs into him. Kind of that like cinematic moment of people bumping into each other and like having that spark. So he is a shifter. So that's how they meet. And then after he goes to the meeting, he actually finds out that there are people in their kind, especially unregistered members, who have been kidnapped and then found like mutilated and killed essentially. So he is hired to, not necessarily hired, I don't think paid for it, so much as like the council wants him to protect this girl, Sarah, who he just ran into. So that was kind of a contrived, I think is the word. So it was like, okay, you can picture it as a setup in an anime where like the first episode they run into each other and then they're together. But anywho, so those are our two main characters. We do have several other, it's not a huge cast, but as far as repeating characters go, you have Zale's family, particularly his two brothers and his sister, who they each have sort of different abilities. And I'll talk about that with the world in a second here. And then you have this kid who works for Sarah in her herbal shop. I can't think of the proper word, apothecary kind of thing. Like she has a lot of, I guess, witchy things. Like she's already kind of connected to that world. Essentially she has like a store where they have like herbs and gems and things like modern Wicca. There we go. That's the word I was, as part of Wicca, we'll say, hey, she's already kind of got these things going on. And she knows once we get into her POV and she's cleaning up in the shop with her little dude, his name is Pace. He's not that little. He's a teen of many, many colors. He likes to dress up differently. She does reveal to us, and in her comment, we already know that Pace also knows she has magic abilities. So she knows she has powers, but she's not aware of the world. She wasn't brought up in it. Now, she has issues with her biological mother, and she was raised by her grandmother, and it's like, there's a lot of characters. The biggest thing that I took away from the characters themselves is they were all set up to be very interesting, and I think as far as their relationships went with each other, I was pretty satisfied with that. Like, I felt like we got enough information. It was one of the real strong points of the story, was that the character relations overall were satisfactory. With Sarah's struggles in particular, I felt like those were a little bit more developed, even though I definitely got so frustrated with Sarah wanting to be independent all the time, especially as like the bad things start happening. And she's like, no, I can handle it on my own. And I'm like, no, you can't. Like, you've literally been captured. You can't be doing this. I think as I discuss the other points, we're going to see a little bit more about the characters, but the ones that you need to know are Sarah and Zale, and that they have like familial things going on. We did not get as much as I would have liked with Zale's side of the family, except that his one brother is a trueborn, so he can use magic. He's not a shifter. The other brother is essentially just human, like a regular person, so he became a doctor. And then the sister, I believe, seems to be a shifter as well. There's a lot of things that I felt were touched on but not explained in depth for me to really sink it in. But moving on, we're going to really quick talk about the overarching plot with the reason why Zale is guarding Sarah. And I mentioned it was because they were suspicious and they were worried that she would become a target because she is part of their world, but she isn't registered because she didn't grow up in that like community. So they were worried she would become a target next, and he becomes a guardian to protect her. Now, that I kind of got that from the synopsis. And I don't know why I expected YA going into this, but I do think that this is a very popular theme in YA with the paranormal romance. So even though the characters are in their 20s, I want to say, I did not foresee the mature themes to come. It's not quite insta-lust between them, because it's definitely heavily focused on their romance, even while all these events are going on. So she is stubborn and wants to be independent and take care of herself and not leave the comfortable world and life that she has created. Whereas since Zale has appeared, everything's been going wrong. Her shop has been trashed. You know, she's been attacked. Obviously, all these things come to the forefront, and she blames Zale for being there and bringing that into her life, even though she, you know, her being herself, she was already at a risk for that. On the other hand, once we're in Zale's point of view, like, he does have a bit more of a lust for Sarah pretty early on, whereas like the one of the few like initial descriptions she has of him is like he's a hulking mountain of a man with like, I don't know, Chris Hemsworth kind of hair. And then out of nowhere they're like on and off. Yeah, I'm gonna just have to talk about this because the romance took over a lot of the plot, where it literally got to the point that we would be in like a battle scene or a critical moment, and that would end sooner than I thought. And we would have these two characters alone, and I'm just like, we're gonna get another scene like that. Which I do think that, you know, romance, and should you decide to either fade to black or show explicit sexual scenes, that they need to be earned. But I also understand that there is a whole group of readers. It happens a lot in fanfic, and that's, you know, because people want that instant gratification of it. So it felt fanficky in that way, that it was just so instant, even though we didn't have the connection or we couldn't see the build up with the characters. The earlier scenes where they just like started making out outside her door, and I was like, she was literally just like yelling at you. Like, it would be one thing if it explained a bit more of, you know, since she is a trueborn and a shifter, and how they have the concept of soul bonds, if that concept kind of brought those emotions to the forefront, where you met your soul bond and you wanted them instantly, or if it just kind of built up more time and more events with them to create a relationship before they were kind of it's not the right gesture, but it just felt really fast for what was going on, especially with kind of hard to read Sarah as a character of, she wants to be independent and, you know, not have him in her life. And she's also like hardcore rejecting this other creeper dude who works next door to, you know, fully give herself to this guy just because he's guarding her, but not like, it's a very weird attraction. And I don't think the build up wasn't explained well enough for the actions to happen, especially because this is supposed to be a series. And I think given the extent that it goes to, especially in this book, it could have been slightly pushed further, given us a little bit more of that build up before the steamy scenes, and you would have had a more stronger relationship to go off of. Now, kind of circling back to the whole like she's in danger plot, it takes a couple twists, and without giving anything away, the bad person who is the one in like charge of the kidnappings, their identity appeared very late in the game, but they definitely seem like, okay, this is the main villain for this book. I expect this character to be our struggle, because I think it was maybe around the halfway point that they were like Dr. E. Very quickly, we started going through a couple of climatic scenes where Sarah was captured by the doctor and certain things were revealed. This is kind of a spoiler, so bear with me, but Dr. E is quickly no longer an issue. And the remaining issue is the other half of that twist, which I kind of did like. I thought it was actually quite reasonable for that person to have such animosity and to kind of pursue this. Now, we don't have the full details of like, to what extent did they want to achieve their goal? So I was like, okay, so now this person's actually the bad guy, and that's where we're going to pick up next time. But no, we got a lot of like, here's the bad guy, done. Sex scene, okay, and then recovery because something else happened, and more kissy face. It was very jarring at the end just because it was too fast for what remained of like page count in the story. And again, I said this is like a 194 page book. It could have easily been fleshed out, push it over 200, go to 300 pages, whatever, if you can really give us those details to solidify the world and give time to the plot that it needs. Because again, I can understand if this was just supposed to be like an instant gratification kind of paranormal romance. But the fact that it is a series and it does have the potentials of a really strong plot, because I thought there were a lot of interesting points that we just didn't get enough information for. I think the pacing in the first half was good, and then the second half just was like, let's finish all of these. We have to make sure we tick off all these boxes for the first book. And I'm looking ahead and I'm like, who's gonna be the villain in the next one? Like, you don't really have quite the same lead into, at least unless I'm forgetting how it ended. With that being my feeling, I'm like, I don't know where this series is going, because I feel like we wrapped up, you know, these particular villains and Sarah's story, because now she's like, I guess I can be part of your world, whatever. So, unless we go into totally different characters, which could be cool. And that way we could see more of the world. Speaking of world building time, again, lots of potential. There were several moments where the author put a unique twist on things, and I was like, okay, so that's how things are. Like, some of them didn't need explaining, like with Zale describing how you become a wolf. It's like, oh, it's not a painful transformation that you like see in the movies. It's very fluid and it's natural for us, and it like feels really good. Versus instead of saying oh my god anywhere, it's oh my goddess. And at first I thought it was just used by characters in the community. They have a different sort of deity system, but I noticed that a couple of characters who didn't seem like they should be using it were. I apologize, I should have taken a note on this, because I remember it was just like this average character and they were like, oh my goddess, and I was like, so is this actual alternate universe goddess and not just like their communal trueborn shifter thing, or is it something in the author's vernacular? Now, I don't know the author personally well enough to know if they use this, but it was certain things like using goddess instead of god. Another one was insulting people a certain way, and it sounded really juvenile, because there was a little bit of language, cursing in this book. Nothing seemed like too outlandish, but the one that stood out was ASS-hat, and I was like, that's a very specific thing to call someone. It may have just been Sarah using it, but I don't think that it was. But definitely wanted more explanation if the goddess thing was actually like a system or a culture going on with the trueborn and shifters, as well as obviously like, what is the extent of Sarah's magic? She's able to throw forces at people and like teleport, but I don't like, there's no sort of encompassing category for the capabilities of these trueborn. So I don't know, like, is it elemental based? Is it just, if you can dream it, you can do it? I don't know, and I want to at least know, is there a sort of limitation to their power? Especially because they noticed that Sarah is very strong compared to, can normal trueborn only like make a candle light up? I don't know. I wanted to see definitely more of that. As far as the shifters goes, it's not only wolves, it's bears, and I think there was a tiger. So we definitely have some variety with the shifters. I guess something that could be interesting about that, now that I think about it, is if they're genetically based, is it based on like the region of their ancestry? Like, is this real world Earth where tigers are only in like Southeast Asia, this certain bears in this region? Like, I think that could be interesting. It may not even have any substance in this world, but that would be at least nice to acknowledge that, yeah, this is how things are with the shifters. And the other cool point, which I thought was, I really want to delve into this, because this was one of the world building points that did affect the plot the most, as far as the whole like who the bad guys are and what their motivations are. Your parents can both have abilities, being trueborn or being shifters, but that may not always pass to the children. So like with Zale's family, they had at least one of each. It's curious, like, is it just because this person is meant to use magic and this person's meant to turn into an animal? Is there more to that? If not, I think the fact that it's even possible is interesting enough that you have more things you can delve into. But It was an urban setting as well, like contemporary urban, so I didn't think you need to describe a lot of things. And because of that, I wanted more descriptions on the paranormal side. So hopefully with the upcoming books, we can get a little bit more of that from the author. And depending on who the subject is of the story, just taking that extra time and feeling okay to take that extra time, because I do know there is pressure in the indie world to constantly be producing and getting your books out, sometimes quicker than you may want to. But I think taking the extra time just to flesh out some of these core items, it's going to take practice for any of the like writing issues to improve, which there were some. The majority of it was tense shifts, which is something that I've struggled with now. Like, at least I can recognize it. Looking at tense shifts would be a huge improvement to the writing itself. I didn't really notice any like typos until like the last bit where everything was moving so fast. I think it's easier to miss errors when things are moving quickly. So they weren't anything significant to hinder my reading, because once I let my brain accept that it was going to be a little off, I had no trouble and I was just able to read the story. But just giving more attention to things outside of the steamy scenes, because I felt like those were the most thoroughly written as far as grammar and description and just dedication. Like, you could feel the dedication to those scenes, whereas other scenes didn't quite have it all there. Like, those could just need a little bit more developing, a little bit more strengthening, and not every single scene has to be super strong. You do need those faster scenes, but I'm really not the person to be giving that particular writing advice. However, seeing a little more development with the New World, since it's new to us as well, would be a great asset to the story, in my opinion. But if you're into paranormal romance and you like yourself a little bit of quick love and things like that, or if you want to delve into a different sort of witch werewolfy story, definitely check out Beastly by Jay Noble. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I'm trying to read and review an indie book every month, and if you have a recommendation, just let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!